All right. Oh my goodness. How many cities in one? Colonial and ruined and revived and reclaimed and pilgrim and commercial multiple times and contested. Dr. Tamara Lotner, who students and fans will be with us all next year here at BU and at the Elie Wiesel Center tomorrow. Are you teaching? Will you be teaching? Yeah? Keep an eye out. Completed her PhD in environmental law at Tel Aviv University while working for Israel's Ministry of Justice, where she has focused on laws pertaining to the national parks. Her work centers on the intersection of law, environment, and energy and the policies that regulate them. These are public goods, these are shared goods, these are communal goods, just like the past. The past is a good that matters to all of us. And for some insight into how environmental law and some of the policies surrounding it can help us think through some of the issues that face archaeologists and the people who are bothered by them, we turn to you tomorrow. Thank you.
Hi. So thank you very much for having me here. Thank you all for coming. I'm not an archaeologist. I must start with that. So I bring a totally different perspective. It was really interesting to hear throughout this day all this perspective from archaeological eyes. And my daily life, I work on trying to solve and to develop policy for issues that we can see in front of our eyes. You guys all are all trying to understand what happened and to get the fact and to get the reality. It's so difficult, and even when you have it in front of your face, it's still very difficult. But in the next 15 minutes, I'll try to have a look on this Jerusalem, old city of Jerusalem, today from the toolbox that I have in environmental law, and suggest how we can learn maybe something from there, what to do, and also how to learn from failures in environmental law, which we have plenty of. I must start, though, I cannot not start with a personal input, because the nice guy that you see here, that's my father when he just graduated as a young architecture from the Technion University in Israel. And he started to work for a big law of architecture firm. And one of his first mission that he received assignment was to go and restore the ruins of the old city, the Jewish quarter in Jerusalem, which was still ruined in the early 70s. And we heard plenty of times that this city was ruined. So at this time it was ruined again. He was traveling around there, wondering, looking for all kind of pieces and making the plans for restoring the old city. And he fell in love with the place. And he and my mother got married and bought a place there, an apartment there. And that's how it turned out that I was born there. And you can see me then at the balcony of our house, just first line to the Dome of Rock, and then also at the snow just next door, looking through Al-Aqsa. I don't know if you could see that there, and here next to the tree that my father planted just when I was born with our neighbors. And I mentioned that specifically because we were a secular family, liberal secular family coming to live there. My mother came from a kibbutz. My father was, I just said, an architect. Our neighbors were very, very religious, Orthodox religious neighbors with like 12 kids. And we were best friends, of course. And the general atmosphere back then in the Jewish quarter was very plural and very diverse. And they were, of course, there were all the quarters, but also within the Jewish quarter, there were light Orthodox, ultra Orthodox, many secular. We had a school there. And I bring that because if you walk today in the Jewish quarter, you'll see something different. And I just made a tour to show you the same places. And you'll see that it became pretty much more ultra-Orthodox. Many buildings were built. It's the same balcony, by the way, from the down the road, but there's another building in between there, all yeshivot. That just to show that my father is still in good shape. And even here, when you see the stairs, everything become more narrow because again, more yeshivas here, and you know, one can ask himself why these changes happened, and there are many reasons. I'm not going to cover them all. I'm just going to offer one perspective, which is from the environmental law perspective, that could suggest some of this change, and that's where I'll start going to the environmental law part. So back in the late 60s and early 70s, Teddy Kollek, who was like the mythical mayor of Jerusalem, started to promote a plan that was actually a plan from before that, but he pushed it through to declare the walls of Jerusalem as a national park. And indeed, he pushed it as a mayor, which is not something very that happens many times, because pushing this towards being a national park, meaning giving some of his authority, which is something politicians usually do not do. But he did do that. And indeed in 1974, it was declared, there was a declaration on national park. It is a little bit similar, like here in the US, you have also the law that allows to declare national parks. And there was a declaration of the national park of around the Jerusalem Walls National Park. That's his name. We'll call him the Jerusalem Walls Park now. And it was declared by the government because that's the procedure, is that the ones with the authority to declare national park is the government. And then when that happens, the authority that gets to manage and be responsible for the national park is the National Park Authority. Today is the Nature Reserve and National Park Authority. And that change, and I'll say a minute, one more about the national park itself. So the national park itself is about 1,100 square meters, and it includes the walls and some of the areas that are attached to them, and not big part of the old city itself, the quarters, but within this national park there are several very important places, like the places that you heard about today, including the city of David, which is, as we know, is also located in, at least partly, in a places which is a neighborhood. People live there. And now if we look, if we think about a neighborhood, a city, we talked, a few people here described how city is a living thing, is a dynamic thing. And if we think about a place where people are living now becoming a national park, you could ask yourself, well, how would that be managed? I mean, usually neighborhoods are managed by municipality, right? Local authorities, not a national park, which knows how to manage parks. So that brings me into to the perspective of the environmental law, because the National Park and Nature Reserve law is an environmental law. It's an environmental law that was drafted and was in Israel, but also around the world. It is part of the laws that were designed during the first period of environmentalism general. I'm making here a small detour for you about environmental laws development, because environmental law developed in general, we could talk about three major waves or phases, and each wave took what was before and added some more tools in order to face how to be able to handle environmental problems. And the first phase, which we can talk about 40s, 50s. The first phase was designed in order to face the problem that more cities and more urban and more industrialization came into the world, and environmentalists back then felt that they must have some areas, some places, somewhere that they would be totally untouched, totally protected. And it is called romantic because the idea was we must have some pristine nature to be left untouched so we can go run away at the weekend, go from the hustle of the city to just see sky full of stars and see the forest and feel the wilderness. So that was the idea of this romantic wave of environmental protection. And the legal tool that was developed to handle this need that was then felt was this nature reserve and national parks, because these places were designed or designated by the government to be left only for protection of this area. Nothing can be done here. If you go here in the US to a national park, you'll know you're not allowed to take, a stone from there. That's the same. It's a maximum protection on this area, but no protection at all outside, right? So it's kind of a very strong protection, but only for what's in the park. Later on, environmental movement understood that this is not enough, because if we protected everything within the national parks and the nature reserve, that means that when we leave, air can be polluted, the water can be polluted. It doesn't help us to protect this kind of environment. And then some new tools got into our life, science from one side, how much of the pollution is okay for us and when it starts to be dangerous, how much chemicals can we have in the water, how much not. So all kind of science that we needed to get into it. And on the other hand, the norms and laws that would make it allowed or not, so today factories need a permission to pollute. So that was a second development. And the third development, which we still have it, I would say today, is the understanding that even if we have all the science and all the laws in the world, at the end of the day, environmental problems are usually also economic and social problem. This understanding is beginning with the environmental justice, if you heard the notion, with understanding that whenever you have a pollution, everybody are being hurt, but some people would be more hurt, right? Elder, sick people, children there would be always those who get harmed more. And from the other hand, there will always be those who benefits, because not putting a filter on a chimney may cause more pollution, but will cost less to the firm. So this stage, you understand that that environmental is not only romantic idea of protecting nature, is not only a scientific question, but it's also really a social economic issue that we have to handle. But that was just a small detour, and then we're coming back to our national park. So if we look at that now, we understand that the law that is, at the bottom of how this place around the walls is managed. We can ask yourself, well, is it the tool that fits? I mean, what's the idea? We take a tool that was supposed to, protect nature, and we put it here. So let's think about it. From one hand, it's difficult to see how a place where it has people living in it, and it has archaeological site, and it has all kind of interest, and of course is so important to three religious and so delicate and complex. How would you manage such a complicated area with a national park authority, which is a centralist government authority that knows something very specific? I would say to that point that when in the 74, when the authority when the authority NPA got to manage it, it immediately gave the authority back to the municipality. Okay, so from 70, which is she's allowed, it allowed this authority. So from 74 until the late 90s, there was no real problem. It was managed by the municipality. But in the late 90s, there was a change in the institutional in the institution of the NPA, the National Park Authority, and the powers came back to the authority, and also were kind of distributed. Some of the powers were left with the authority, and some were given to the municipality, and some was given to a private NGO, which we all know, I guess, or many that sits here, Elad, which is a private NGO that was already owning several of the places there in the old city, in the city of David. And when the National Park Authority wanted to start manage there, it really couldn't. It was too difficult. There was too many authorities there. So it gave it to them. And the whole management of this place became really difficult. So we could ask ourselves if that's the way that we could manage such a place. On the other side, we do have to remember that, or we can look at that in a different way, thinking that if we look today on environmental law and protection, we would see many failures. And as I said in the beginning, you would see places that are full of pollution, even though we have laws against pollution. You could see climate change, even though we tried to limit with environmental laws the industry. But this part of law, actually, of the national parks and nature reserves, this kind of law did an excellent job in protecting the areas that it wanted to protect. So if we do come back to our archaeological side and antiquities and this area that we think is worth protecting, maybe this tool could give us some power that we could benefit from. So if we do take the benefit, how do we do it right? Okay, so we go back and we take another lesson. We try to look at how environmental law did manage to reconcile all kinds of conflicts of interest that emerged when you want to protect the nature. Because the conflicts of interest and the different interests that are on the table when you want to protect nature and when you want to protect archaeological sites would generally be similar, or at least there are many interests here, interest here. And I heard at least, I think, twice here in the lectures today that, the development of the city is one of the things that, always put obstacle on archaeology and on protecting. So this part of the interest is similar. So if we want to go there and learn some lesson from there, we could have a look at one specific approach that is today used that specific approach is used to manage river basins. We have a problem with rivers for many years, and it's true around the world and in Israel too, that rivers were looked upon for many years as some kind of burden. When you want to build a city and you have a river there, it's not like you would imagine that the mayor will say, oh, how nice, we're going to have a river in the middle of the city. No, in Israel, most of the rivers are either polluted, drained totally, so you could build there, or closed into concrete canals where they pass and nobody knows them. We have less than 20% of the water in the region, in rivers with water that are clean in Israel, very little. So, and the problem with that is that, first of all, the water are polluted. And then today we understand we cannot use this water. And second, we have floodings because the rivers used to be part of what was absorbing the water when it rains. So this approach of just draining up the rivers did not work out. So in recent years, a new approach is being promoted for integrated management of river basins. And that approach would bring around the table all the interest and all the stakeholders that are required to manage this river basin. That would mean, for example, the people who live next by, the agriculture who need this water or do not want this water, the drainage authority, of course, because they're the one responsible for all the drainage and where would that water go? The industry, because if you have a plant or factory that is throwing all its pollution to the river and you would not find another solution for this factory, it will continue to pollute. So you put around the table all these stakeholders and start solving the problems and talking about them together. It doesn't mean that you solve all the problem. Also, it doesn't mean that everyone are equal around the table. You have authority that manage it all. But what we see is that when this kind of process is being done, then the protected area that we really want to protect would be probably much better protected. We will reach to the protection that we want if we do that process, with all the parties around the table from the beginning and all the way through. We provide solutions by experts and engineers and whatever we need, and we do the whole process, open to the public and transparent. Couple of examples that we could see here. For example, this is the Gazelle Valley from Jerusalem. I don't know if you've been there, but any of you that goes to Jerusalem should. And again, this is a project that started with the idea that we want to protect the nature here. But just declaring a nature reserve around it would not help, because this place would be flooded at the first rain, and because there was a battle with the developers would be right over the corner. And the only way it could be promoted and really realized is by this kind of integrated management approach, putting everybody around the table and making everybody actually win from this. And a second project that I brought in that is still taking place and being realized these days, it's from the Tzipori River, much north in Israel, which is a little bit more complicated just because there are more communities around the table here. It's not only Jewish neighborhood, there are also Christian and Muslim around, and there are rural communities and urban communities. And again, a process that brings everybody around the table, and now starting to show us as a project that really can succeed. So I'm just bringing that as a general question for you, and point of something to think about is coming back to the city of David. We have a very complicated area. We have plenty of authorities with plenty of interest parties. And how could we use the tool of national park, which give us a very maximum protection, but still maybe bring around the table all the parties and all the stakeholders in order to also make this living place, livable and not as tension and not as even and diverse as it used to be or as it could be. Yeah, I think I'd stop here.
When we talked in October, we said, let's end with a question so that we can get some ideas on the table and get some conversation going. People will probably have opinions. People probably have something to say.
The National Park Authority is a law by the Israeli state. Is that recognized? How, or I'd say that differently, how does it reconcile or doesn't reconcile with the international law? Okay, like let's say that there is a committee there that is organized by all parties. Every stakeholder in this area is part of this group. Yeah. Will the international law see that as a viable concept that can rule, can make decisions over the place?
Well, international law doesn't tell states how to rule or how to generally, or which authority to build. And when I say that all the parties need to be around the table, it doesn't necessarily mean that they all need to be, authorized as the same. I mean, you could have this authority like the National Park Authority, or like we have in the planning committees, where you have discussion that you bring all the players to the table and you discuss it. At the end of the day, there will be a decision which would either be made by the head of this authority or by vote. I mean, you could decide. And international law has no problem with the institutions that a state decide on. As long as it doesn't have any other international law problem. But the institution that would make the decision, that wouldn't be a problem for international law to accept any authority. And of course, it would have to be regulated by law. So, yeah.
Not sure, because the international law is saying that Israel has no right, or at least until the dispute is over, has no right to decide over things. So it's not a matter of what do you decide, it's the matter of whether you're even allowed to decide.
No, okay, so that is like if international law believes that Israel has no right there, then the standing would not change. But within that, so that won't change no matter which authority. It's not going to solve international dispute. What it may solve is how to manage this area while there is a dispute, because what happens today is that it is managed by all these authorities. So that's reality. And actually, I think that this approach means that even if I'm not coming here to judge now who's supposed to rule there or belongs to whom, no matter who owned and who managed it, it could take this approach and bring all the players into the table. Because really, I mean, judging who's the owner of the place that's a very different discussion. But once we decided that somebody is there, or once reality shows that somebody is there, then there are several ways to manage this, and some could be more robust and more, I believe, more effective also, and more efficient.
How do you start?
How do I start to?
How do you start? How do you start to bring the people to the table? How do you start? Is it a public, and now the Tzipori, the Nahal Tzipori?
So if we look, for example, at the Nahal Tzipori, Israel made a special body, kind of authority, but it's not an authority by law. They just organized, put the budget, a specific, actually it is called a national plan, I think, for Nahal Tzipori. And then there's a budget to put people, somebody to manage it, and to prepare the plans. You need a decision from the government, and you need the budget, and then you start bringing on people, and then you start a process. You make, you advertise, you go to communities, you start to talk to them, you put them in the process. It's very long, and it's a demanding process. It's not an easy process. But it makes people want to be part of it. It makes people want their voice to be heard. And then once their voice was heard, they want it to be successful. And then they make sure that nobody's throwing garbage to the river. It takes some kind of educational work to do sometimes. But yes, basically you need a decision that this is the way you want to manage it, and then you put budget into it, and then you think, how should I do it? Many times you start with kind of a round table that asks people, give us your ideas of how to manage it, and then you start really managing. By the way, in the Giselle Valley, it was a little bit different, because it was around the table were seated mainly authorities, like several authorities, and then brought in the neighbors and communities. So there are several ways, but.
So what about, so for example, the Gazelle Valley, which is fabulous, I have been to it, or the Nahal Tzipori, where there are commercial interests, so some aspects are multiple goods, but some aspects are zero sum, right? Some aspects, if you get what you want, I am not going to get what I want.
Yes.
So maybe in the Gazelle Valley, there were developers who were just not going to be able to develop.
I'm sure there were. And I think that's why the decision of making a place national park, for example, or nature reserve, or declaring this as this kind of national plan to do this is a strong tool. And that's why I wouldn't put it aside and say, oh, nature reserve or national park is not, it's not good for this because it's a complex neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
Because we could use this tool as a really strong protection tool. We have that tool. So when we use it, we could, let's take this tool that gives such a strong protection for an area, whether it's nature or archaeological site. We'll give the protection. Now we're going to manage it wisely and inclusively. It's kind of taking the best of several worlds. And while we declaring that, by the way, to make a place national park or nature reserve is a very, very complicated process. Today, it's, still being done, but it's very difficult. And the reason is exactly that, because it stopped development and developers. So if you could do that, you get a great protection. I wouldn't throw that away because we already have this protection there, but we could manage it differently.
Who would have to start? Would it be the Rashut? Would it be Elad? Would it be the Ministry of Justice?
I believe it should come from the government, basically. I believe it should be a governmental decision. National Park Authority, and I don't know. I don't know if they have any. I don't know if they are in need for that, because they have the powers that they need. So I would say that would have to be something that's coming from the government.
Would that we had the power.
Sorry?
Would that we had
Yes.
the power. Would that we had. Seeing no more hands, and therefore presuming that people have somehow or another, at least temporarily, had their fill of a topic as boundless even as Jerusalem, I would love to thank Yuval and Yiftach and Tehillah and Bethany and Tamara and Yana, who hopefully is asleep now. It's probably 2:00 in the morning in Tbilisi, Georgia. And of course, all of you very stalwart participants for joining us today for this really special opportunity. And thanks to the Elie Wiesel Center, and thanks to Latz. Thank you, Latz. And have a great evening.